Hello and welcome to another episode of Queer is Here to Stay. My name's Ronnie. I am two-spirit. I am non-binary, sex repulsed asexual, and lesbian. And I'm just filled with labels, apparently. But I find it's the best way to express myself. And I also have found that this podcast is definitely a helpful way for me to express myself as well. So I want to thank planksip for helping me to host and organize this podcast and to help me upload it and for basically just helping me out with everything to do with this. So I appreciate planksip. You should definitely go check them out. And now let's get on with the episode. So I find that labels are hugely important. They're not important for everybody. They're not for everybody, actually, because some people just are able to express themselves how they want to. But for myself, labels were a huge part of helping me come to terms with myself. And I am thankful that not everybody needs it. But in terms of those who do, I wanted to talk a bit about that because I think labels are very important about who we are. And I think that every label is just as important as the next. For example, my T-Spirit label. That one took me a long time to find, as I've expressed in previous episodes. But when I found it, it was refreshing because I finally had a word to express myself. And just as important as that T-Spirit label was for me, the label of heterosexuality is just as important. People don't really need to announce it. That's a whole other issue as well, just because they don't need to defend themselves as being who they are. But heterosexuality is a label, and it means that you're straight. You are attracted to the opposing gender of who you are. Now, this also gets into a bit more complex when you think about those folks who are transgendered, born one gender, but transitioned to the gender that felt right to them. And if their transition gender was say they're now female and they express themselves as female and that's who they are because they're female, but they're attracted to the male gender. They are considered heterosexual. They're considered straight because they are a woman attracted to a man, and same with vice versa. So heterosexuality in itself also has its own sub-labels as well. But if you want to get into true heterosexuality, that's known as cisgender. Now, this is something that I found complicated even to myself, because what is cisgender? It doesn't sound like a great word, to be honest. It has the word gender in it. That's all I knew. And for years, I just couldn't figure it out. So, to define cisgender, it basically means following the gender binary in attraction. For example, physically, I am female. Now, ignoring my other labels to say that I am female and say that I'm attracted to males, and that's how I see myself. I'm not only heterosexual, I'd be cisgender as well. So going from there, that is basically being super straight, as opposed to super gay, which is, sorry, I was watching Reba sitcom recently, so. Super gay was on an episode, and it was hilarious, mostly because Reba had to play super gay for an episode, and it was hilarious. But anyways, so cisgender basically means following gender binary and gender attraction and not wavering from that. And I've got to say, that is a label that is valid in itself. It is not something to ignore. Just because you're cisgender doesn't mean you're any less valid than, say, someone like me who is two-spirit. Everyone's valid for being who they are, as long as you are true to who you are. So, as a complicated, long explanation compared to that, and homosexuality in itself also has many labels. Most go with the term gay, like I was saying before, the whole super gay thing. But gay started out as another word meaning happy, but it also became the word for homosexual, and it became a bit of an insult, I suppose you could say. Well, it definitely was used as an insult, and it was used as a mental illness diagnosis as well. Homosexual behaviors was considered a mental illness. But for myself, whenever I tell people, trying to explain the non-binary thing to everybody gets complicated and a bit annoying and repetitive after a while. So I just tell them I'm gay. It's the simplest way to put it. And while it does get annoying, it's easiest way for people to understand what I'm trying to tell them without going into an overly progressive explanation like I am doing right now. But homosexual is gay and lesbian, and it depends on what your gender is to what it could be a physical gender, it could be a spiritual gender like myself, or it can be a transition gender who's attracted to the same gender of who they are. So moving on from that, then there's queer. That we talked about in a previous episode about being a huge umbrella term. Like, it can mean anything and everything. It was also used as an insult before to say people were using queer behavior, But that's another term I used for myself before I sort of came into my own being, because who was I, And as a result, I used the term queer. I think I also used it because it made people uncomfortable, but I also wanted to use it to claim it, So, like, instead of people using it to insult me and to bully me, I used it to label myself because, well, for several reasons. One, people who didn't understand people outside of heterosexuality couldn't fully understand it, but at the same time, they knew it could mean, your attraction and gender is different. It was a basic understanding that I think blanketed a lot of people so that it was easier to get across. I stopped using it after a while, after I found the term two-spirit, so like some people use that term instead, and it's more of a Western term, of course, but it's a valid label. And like heterosexuality, cisgender, gay, lesbian, queer are all valid identities without going into the entire sublabel of identities. These ones are blanket terms, umbrella terms, they can cover a lot. And it goes into labels without becoming overly complicated, but still allows people to become valid for themselves. It also prevents people from having to over-explain everything like I do, but I do that as a normal thing. It's sort of like my go-to. And I've got to say, religion is not to blame. At least not completely. Like, a lot of people who are devoted to their religions and do find a lot of fault with these labels. But at the same time, not all religious people find fault with it. So I just want to put that out there. I do not blame religion. I blame people not understanding, I suppose. And they aren't always necessarily religious. They could be what could be coined as old-fashioned, born in another generation, or simple ignorance. It's just everyone has their own way of figuring things out. And not everyone is able to fully understand it. And I hope through this podcast that I am able to help people understand a bit more. I know I can't, fix the misunderstandings. And sometimes I do make it worse. Like, I ramble on as I do. I don't fully even understand the labels myself. As I said earlier, cisgender was something I only really figured out what it meant recently. Like, for example, when I was talking to my mother, she took a while to process my own identity when I came out. And while it was not perfect, she did eventually come to understand it. And then we were discussing cisgender, and I was telling her about its definition, what it meant. And she said, well, that's who I am. And I told her, yeah, and it's who you are. And therefore, you don't need to change who you are if you're comfortable with that label, So it's sort of like it helped me and my mother come to our own understandings about who we are as people, So just remember to be kind. Not everyone understands. I didn't understand. My family didn't fully understand either. Not everyone does. Some people choose to remain ignorant, and those people I truly cannot help. But those who choose to learn can learn through these umbrella terms and then go from there. And it's just understanding labels, I find, is important. I know I keep on repeating that because I've said it in other episodes before as well. Labels define us, but some people don't want labels to define us. So it's something to juggle, definitely, but it's something I'm comfortable with. So for those who are comfortable with it, go ahead. And for one of my classes at the university, I was assigned this book. beyond the gender binary, and it speaks from the personal experience of, pardon me if I butcher this name because sometimes I can't pronounce names. Alok Manand. This person is a non-binary person. They're also a mixed race, so they got a lot to do with labels, and they needed to figure it out. And the book is small, like it's called the pocket book, but it gives a lot of information from this person's perspective on how labels both deterred them, helped them, and was used against them, and how it's portrayed through the media as well as not something that's always very helpful. So, but I totally recommend the book. It's not very much actually. You can get it through the Penguin Workshop, I think, and it's meant to be a teaching tool for teenagers. And I think it could even be used for younger than that, because this person had struggled with their labels and identity since very, very young. So they use labels, and it was something that helped them later on in their life once they were able to accept themselves. And I find that that's something similar for me as well. And it's important, I gotta say. And just using those simple labels I listed can help you figure yourself out, or maybe figure someone else out, or help broach the subject with a child or with a relative, and just learning to be yourself, because learning to be myself certainly took a weight off of my shoulders. And so to end the episode, I would just like to say that I'm a flawed human being. I think I have a number of flaws, but let's not get into that. But every human being is flawed, and I am no different. And I am ashamed, but not ignorant, in knowing that I had passed judgment on other people for their labels on me, or the labels I've used on them before I educated myself. And I have certainly judged people for their beliefs and my own beliefs, whether it be religion or education or otherwise. And it's something that I've had to consciously figure out how to stop. Like, it's a basic human reaction to snap judgment, but what we can control is how we output it. Like, I might judge people, but at the same time, I hold back my outer thoughts most of the time. Again, flawed. I don't do it all the time, but I hold back on voicing my judgment until I can learn more about the person. Because without knowing more, how can I actually judge them fully, you know? And my judgment was definitely based on a lack of knowledge about other people, about myself, about the world, about everything. Because I gotta say, I'm a bit naive when it comes to the world. I do my best not to try to judge anyone immediately. I can't say I've stopped it completely, but I definitely actively try not to. And to say I wouldn't judge would be a lie, because it is a human reaction. But I will be myself. I won't hide who I am, and I don't want anyone else to hide themselves either. I want them to be themselves, as long as it is kind. So I want to thank you guys for joining me for another episode of Queer is Here to Stay. I am queer, and I am here to stay. And thank you to Planksip for helping me with this podcast. I hope you guys have an awesome day. See you next time.